At 17,600 feet, a city of tents rises where explorers once faced death just reaching the base. Everest is now a marketplace with more than 600 climbers each season and guides charging $40,000 for a shot at the summit. But behind every expedition, invisible risks mount for those who keep the path open. How did the world's deadliest mountain transform from hallowed conquest to high-altitude enterprise, and who truly pays the price? In 1953, the summit of Mount Everest was reached for the first time by Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa from Nepal. Their climb was the result of decades of failed attempts and a culture that saw Everest as the ultimate test of human endurance. Between 1921 and 1952, British-led expeditions tried 7 times to conquer the mountain. More than 400 men passed through base camp, but no one stood on the summit. 13 climbers died, lost to avalanches, altitude sickness, and exposure. The mountain's reputation grew with every failure. Reaching base camp alone took weeks of trekking through remote valleys, carrying tons of supplies on the backs of porters and yaks. Expeditions moved with military precision, relying on rationed oxygen, heavy canvas tents, and maps that left much to the imagination. Above 8,000 meters, in the death zone, no climber could fully adapt. Survival depended on luck as much as skill. In those years, risk was accepted as the price of ambition. Everest was not a destination for crowds or commerce. It stood as a symbol of national pride and personal sacrifice, where triumph was measured in narrow margins and tragedy was never far behind. The mountain's first conquerors became legends, but the world they climbed in was about to change. Soon, the pursuit of Everest would move from the realm of elite explorers to something far more accessible and far more complicated. At nearly 17,600 feet, base camp sprawls across the rocky glacier like a temporary city. During climbing season, hundreds of brightly colored tents line the ice, each one part of an expedition with its own cooks, guides, and satellite links. The hum of generators powers wireless internet hotspots and charging stations. Satellite phones connect climbers to families thousands of miles away. Inside heated dining tents, teams gather for catered meals, omelets at breakfast, pasta at dinner, even espresso machines for those willing to pay. Operators advertise guided trips for $40,000 or more, with some luxury packages stretching well beyond that. For many, the price covers not only logistics, but a sense of security. Oxygen bottles stacked in neat rows, weather forecasts delivered by satellite, medical staff on call. But comfort at base camp does not erase the risks above. The number of permits has soared, with more than 600 climbers granted access in peak years. This surge turns the mountain into a global business, drawing operators from Nepal and abroad, each competing to attract clients with promises of safety and success. The local economy thrives on this influx. Porters, cooks, and guides find steady work, and nearby villages see a seasonal boom as supplies flow up the trail. Yet the crowds at base camp are only the beginning. Behind every expedition's polished surface lies a hidden workforce, Sherpas and laborers whose efforts make these comforts possible. Their story and the dangers they face beyond the city of tents shape the reality of Everest far more than any luxury menu. Before any climber sets foot on the upper slopes, a small team of icefall specialists faces the most unpredictable part of Everest. These are the Sherpas, known as icefall doctors. Each season, about 20 men from nearby villages arrive weeks before the crowds, tasked with fixing hundreds of ladders and ropes across the icy fall, Khumbu Icefall, a shifting maze of crevasses and towering ice blocks that stands between base camp and the mountain's higher camps. The icefall moves several feet every day. Seracs collapse without warning. For the doctors, every crossing means gambling with their lives, not once but dozens of times, as they carve a path that hundreds will follow. The work is dangerous, but for many, it is the best way to provide for their families. A season's pay, $3,000 to $5,000, can support a household for a year in the Khumbu region, where few other jobs offer such stability. Yet the cost is measured in risk, not just effort. In April 2014, a massive serac broke loose above the icefall. 16 Sherpas were buried in seconds, the deadliest accident in Everest's history at the time. The tragedy forced a reckoning. Insurance payouts were raised, and some labor protections were introduced. But the essential danger remains. Each spring, new families wait for news from the mountain, knowing that a single misstep or a shifting block of ice can change everything. For the Sherpas, climbing is not just a job, it is a decision made for the sake of those waiting at home, every season, every day. The numbers on Everest tell a story of ambition and loss. Since records began, 335 climbers have died on its slopes. The Himalayan database tracks each name, each date, each cause, yet the true cost is measured not just in statistics, but in the lives cut short and the families left waiting. Roughly 1 in 3 deaths happens after the summit, on the descent, when exhaustion and thin air turn every step into a gamble. Above 8,000 meters, rescue is rarely possible. The terrain is too steep, the air too thin for helicopters, and the physical demands are too great for even the strongest Sherpas to bring the fallen down. Most bodies remain where they fell. Some are visible for decades, others are hidden by shifting snow and ice. Their presence serves as a silent memorial, a reminder that on Everest, survival is never guaranteed. The limits of the mountain are not just physical, they are biological, setting boundaries that no amount of experience or equipment can fully overcome. At 26,000 feet, the body enters a zone where oxygen drops to about 1/3 of the level found at sea level. High-altitude physiologists describe this as a hard ceiling. No acclimatization, training, or technology can erase the deficit. The extreme Everest studies tracked climbers' oxygen saturation as they moved higher, recording levels that would be considered life-threatening in any hospital. Even with supplemental oxygen, blood oxygen readings can fall below 60%. Judgment falters, movements slow, and the risk of cerebral or pulmonary edema rises with every hour spent above this threshold. In 2019, more than 200 climbers found themselves bottlenecked just below the summit, forced to wait for hours in the death zone. Radio logs from that day captured voices slurring, confusion over route choices, and mounting distress as oxygen supplies ran low. One climber later recalled that it felt like my brain was shutting off, but I had nowhere to go. In these moments, biology, not equipment or experience, sets the limit. Delays from crowding only amplify the danger, stretching each climber's fragile window for survival. On the mountain's upper slopes, the rules are changing faster than climbers can adapt. Veteran expedition leaders warn that Everest's dangers are no longer just a matter of altitude or skill. Satellite images reveal the Khumbu Glacier retreating by more than a kilometer since 2000, carving new crevasses and sending rock fall down routes once considered stable. The mountain is not what it was a decade ago, says one guide with over 20 summits. We are fixing ropes twice as often because the ice is melting under our feet. For these leaders, the problem is not just the number of climbers, but the system that allows anyone with enough money to join the line. They call for hard limits, caps on permits, mandatory experience on other 7,000-meter peaks, and real enforcement to keep unprepared climbers off the ropes. The choices are stark. Keep Everest open to all and accept the rising toll, or draw a line that protects both climbers and the Sherpas who lead them. The decision, they say, belongs to everyone invested in the mountain's future. Today, Everest summit remains a magnet for ambition, even as climate instability and overcrowding push risks higher each season. Survival depends on respecting limits, both environmental and human. In the end, the mountain's challenge is not just ascent, but whether we learn to balance pursuit with restraint.